Hello and good afternoon, CTS 265, Section 840 students for the Fall 2015 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This is the CCNP route course, and this afternoon's video tutorial is going to be a quick supplement on the archive feature. And we had commented in class, or I had commented in class, that this is an extremely popular feature and one that can certainly save you if you've got it configured properly, and if you were to, for whatever reason, have your configuration wiped out. And so that's really what the archive command is all about. It's about saving off your configuration file either at regularly scheduled intervals, and you can save it off to your external storage, if that happens to be a compact flash, or you could save it off to your TFTP server. But again, the key point is that you've got those configurations there that you can call back. So let's go ahead and dive in here and take a look at how we would configure archiving. So again, not only saving your configuration, but possibly saving your job if for whatever reason you were to delete an important config and you needed to get that config back, or you just needed to roll back to a certain version of your configuration. So we're going to go from user exec to privilege exec. Sorry about that, to privilege exec into global config, and it's from global config where we simply type archive, and that's it. This is enough to get us into the archive configuration mode. Now you can see we've got some options here. Default and exit we're not interested in, but we are interested in logging, right? So if I were to say log and then put a question mark here, I'm going to be logging changes that get made to the running config. And then I'm going to say logging, and I want to enable the logging. I want to make the logging persistent, and I want the size of that log to be the maximum. So we'll do logging size. It's 1,000 commands, I think. Yeah, the default is 100, but we want to keep the last 1,000 commands that have been run. Now, also in the log config area, you can see we were working with the logging option. We also want to do the hide keys option, and this suppresses passwords when the commands are being displayed. So we're simply going to say hide keys, and let's go ahead and say notify syslog. So not only, and the content type will be added on auto-magically for us, so we'll go ahead and put it on there anyway, for plain text. And we actually have this configured in our environment so that every configuration command that gets run, not only is it being logged to the router, and you'll see that here in a second, but it's also being saved off to the syslog server. That way, in case the router got wiped out or compromised, you would still be able to go back and pull up the commands, the last 1,000 commands that had been run, the exec commands that had been run on this router. So let's take a look and see, do show run section archive. So what does the archive section look like right now? Well, we're logging the configuration commands. We've got it enabled, the persistent auto for what we're logging. And the persistent is that it's going to hold through a reboot. We've got the notify syslog content type plain text, and we're hiding the password information. So there's still some work that needs to be done here. So back at the main config level, under the archive, how many backup copies do we want to keep, right? So if I were to put maximum, you can see we can keep between 1 and 14. I believe that the default is 10. Do show archive. And we're not enabled yet. So we'll say maximum 14, and we're going to put the archive path command. Let's get that archive path in there first. So for us, we're going to say the path is going to be /:, and I'm going to put vault/config_backups. And actually, let's fix that. We need that / at the end to indicate that it's going to be, and actually, let's create the directory. So I'm going to go ahead and say do make dir vault. So we're going to make that, and it exists. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say make config_backups. So now when we rerun this command, and it's very critical that you leave that / at the end of this command. If you don't put the / at the end of this command, it's going to take config_backups as the file name or part of the file name for every single backup that it creates. And so this is the command that we want to use. And hold on a second, air parsing, let's take a look. Do dir, so there's vault, so do dir vault/config_backups. So do make dir vault/config_backups. Okay, so there it's been created. I might have had a typo earlier on. So my path is going to be /vault_config_backups. And you can see we're now getting these parser syslog messages here about commands that are being run that we're actually keeping track of at this point. So we've got the path in there, right? So that's where we're going to save our configs to. So let's go ahead now and say maximum 14, right? Because we want to make sure we keep as many as we possibly can. Now the time period is an interesting option. So this allows you to sort of auto-magically, at whatever the given time period is, the number of minutes to wait between archive creation. So how many minutes do we want to wait between having the router auto-magically archive off its current running config? So I'm going to go ahead and say 9, and that just for the purposes of this video. What I use is I use 2 weeks, which I think is 21,160, I believe, or 20,160. It's something around that area. Now the next option we're interested in is the write memory. And every time you type write memory, it's going to create an archive configuration for you. So now let's take a look. Do show run section archive. So this is what our archive configuration looks like. In fact, the one that I use in production looks very, very similar to this. And these are all of the things that we're doing. So this is the path where the configs will be stored. I'm going to keep a maximum of 14 in the archive command. So when I say do show archive, you can see that when I enabled it, this is the most recent one that I have, and you'll see it has a 0. If I were to type end and say write memory, right, and we'll give it a second here, and say show archive now. Now this is the most recent, right? And it gives me my time down to milliseconds, and then if it's the same date, then we get the 1 at the end. And you can see I've got room for 14. So that if I were to make a series of changes, I would be able to go back in and pull those changes out, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say pull those changes out. Basically just roll back to the previous version of the config. Now, remember I said that you're actually logging all of the commands that are being run. So if I were to say show archive log config all and hit enter. So here is a list of the commands that have been run from the moment I said logging enable. We've got the logging persistent command, and you can see it says console at console. If I was logged in as a user, it would say Travis at console. So not only do you keep the commands, you actually get to see who is running those commands. All right, so now what we're going to do is let's do this. So we'll do a quick scenario here. If I say show IP interface brief, I think we're running show IP EIG or OS, yeah, EIGRP neighbors. Are we running EIGRP here? Yeah, we are. So let's say you make a mistake. Let's say you're on router 1, you go into global config and you say no router EIGRP, what do we call it? I think, or no router, sorry, EIGRP route. Now we should see the adjacency go down. I believe we had an adjacency up here with the EIG, or actually, yeah, did we not? Yeah, we did. So do show run, do show IP, whoops, EIGRP neighbors. So as you can see, we don't have any neighbors anymore. So the EIGRP adjacency has gone down. Now, if I realize right now that, hey, you know what? I can't remember what I just removed. I don't remember any of the settings that were in there, but I want to roll back to that version of the config, because when I was running this version of the config before I made changes to it, everything was good. And so here's how you would do a configure replace. And those of you familiar with JuneOS, you should be familiar with the rollback command. So if I were to say configure replace and put flash : then I'm going to go ahead and grab, actually I could have grabbed the flash as well. We're going to grab all of that. So I'm going to say copy and paste the Vault config backups, the most recent version that we had. Now there's still some options. I can list the commands that are going to be applied in each pass, so we can list those out. And then the time. So here's what we're going to do. To make sure that we have the time for which to wait in minutes. So we're going to say, I'll say 10 minutes. So if I don't confirm it within 10 minutes, it's going to flip it right back to being, and in fact, let's go ahead and say 1 minute. It's going to flip it back to being broken. So I hit enter, and it asks me, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm going to say yes. So now we should see the commands that are going to be run, and you can see right here, list of rollback commands. There is the entire named EIGRP configuration. Now, remember, I have to type config confirm within a minute. Let's see, show IP EIGRP neighbors. Is my configuration back? It is. My adjacency is back. My configuration is back. If I say show run section EIGRP, we can see that there is the EIGRP configuration. So the configure replace command allows me to basically pick a previous version of the config and then have that configuration applied. And you'll notice that it didn't shut the interfaces down or anything. It simply reapplied the EIGRP configuration, and now we're back up and functional. However, remember, I said time 1. So in 60 seconds, we should be losing these changes which have fixed our config because we did not type, and there you go. And you can see that list of rollback commands, and so here is what it's taking off of there. So the rollback is done. So now if I were to say show archive, you'll notice that that is now the most recent, right? The -2, but I know that the -1 works. So let's go ahead and say show IP EIGRP neighbors. I have no neighbor relationship. So let's rerun that rollback command, or the config replace command, I should say. And I'm going to go ahead and put time 11 to give us a little time. It's going to say, do you want to proceed? I'm going to say yes. And you can see it created that -3. But there are the commands that are being applied to the config. So let's go ahead and check. Show IP EIGRP neighbors. All right, so we're up. The adjacency is up. Show IP EIGRP, or show IP route EIGRP. Right, so you can see I've got my routes back and everything. So now all I need to do is type configure confirm. And that is going to ensure that you can see the archive diff5 rollback commit confirmed, change confirmed, because I want to keep this version of the configuration. So let's take a look at show archive. We should have 4 copies of the config, the most recent being that one, but I want to make sure that I do a write mem, because this is the config that I want to keep. And I know right now that this is working. If I say show archive, we now have 5, and I know that that is a legitimate and good config, that everything is working the way it should be. Now, we've also configured the persistent setup. So let me go ahead and do this. I'm going to say show run section, because there's a difference when you go to do this on a router as compared to a switch. So let's grab this here. I'm going to copy that. And I already said write mem. So remember, we have the persistent option set so that we should see the last 1,000 commands that have been run. And again, the command to show show archive log config all, I believe. Yeah, config all. And so take a look. We're keeping track of all of the configuration commands. And again, if you had users logging in, it would have their username here so that you could go back after the fact to see, you know, that scenario when the junior admin goes into the data center and all of a sudden everybody loses connectivity, and you go up and ask them, what did they do? And they say, well, I didn't do anything. I didn't change anything. So you can actually go right back onto the hardware and check and see exactly what it is they did do for you to lose connectivity. And again, that's show archive log config all. And you can see it's showing all the configuration commands, even the commands that were being applied as we rolled forward and rolled back, or I should say rolled back and then rolled forward by config replace, by replacing the configuration that we had. So here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and reload, and while we're reloading this here, we've already done our save mem to prove that it's persistent across reboots. We're going to come over to switch 2, and we're going to go from user exec to privilege exec into global config. And actually, I'm going to say do make dir vault, and then we're going to say it already exists. Okay, so we're going to say do make dir config underscore backups. All right. So then I'm going to paste this configuration in. We're going to get some errors here, and actually we received quite a. Oh, it highlighted what I had previously highlighted. I apologize. Let me come back over here to where we were at right here. So let's grab this here real quick. Whoops. And we should still have that highlighted. I want to say copy. So we'll come back over here to the switch, and we're simply going to paste in that config. Right? Now you'll notice it says configuration log persistency feature not enabled, even though I've typed the command in. And here's the rule. If the switch does not have external storage of some kind, either a compact flash card or some other type of external storage, you are not going to be able to do the logging persistent. We have this working on 7606s as well as 6500 series switches, all of which have compact flash cards, and it works fabulously. However, 2960s, 2950s, 3550s, 3750, 3750Xs, 3850s, 3650s, we can't, it simply doesn't work because there is no removable storage. So when I say do show run section archive, and actually you can't do that on a switch. So here is the section. You'll notice it took the logging persistent command, it just did not keep it, right? It just kind of dumped it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Q, and we'll type in, and I'm going to say write mem, and this should archive off a copy of the configuration. So if I were to say show archive on the switch, let's see, bad file number. Let me check and see. So if I say dir, and we've got vault, let's see, dir vault, and it did not create config backup. So let's go ahead and say make dir, make dir vault / config underscore backup. So, and now let's double check that. Yeah, so that directory needs to exist. If the config backups directory doesn't exist, you're going to see that error that we just saw, which is this bad file number, right? So I say write mem, it should save it off. We'll say show archive, and there we go. Yeah, for some reason it did not take that the first make dir. So again, this is my most recent. This is the one that we are most interested in. You can see the date on the switch is clearly off, but that's okay. And the same rules apply. So if I were to say show archive config all, or not show archive, show, this command drives me nuts. Yeah, I thought show archive, ARC, show archive. Oh, I'm sorry, I misspelled archive. Show archive config, and incremental diffs and rollback. So interestingly enough, it will not let me do a show archive. Oh, I'm sorry, I left off log. My apologies. Config all. There we go. So you do see the commands, just like we did on the router. We're going to see the same commands on the switches. And so it's not persistent across reboots. However, this is a fantastic way for auditing purposes to be able to keep track of which users are running which commands and what those commands are actually doing. Right? So you can actually see who's running what commands. So again, so let's do a show run, and can I do a begin archive? Let's see if that works. All right, so here is the archive section that we're currently using on the switch. Again, logging persistent is off because there is no external storage on my 3750 anyway. Again, you want to make sure that you get that / at the end of the directory to make sure that the switch and router know it's a directory, right? So let's come back over to router 1 here. You can see that the adjacency is back up. We'll go from user exec to privilege exec. If I say show archive log config all, there they are. Remember, and you're actually going to see the commands that were being run when the router booted up. So there's our logging persistent auto, the logging size. So again, these are all of the commands that were being run as the router was booting up. So these are the commands that have been configured on the router. If I say show archive, that is the most recent archive, right? All right, well, this has been a quick supplemental tutorial. There was a lot of interest in this topic when we talked about it from not only the backup perspective, saving your configs, but also from an auditing perspective so that you can go back and see the commands that were run. So show archive log config all. So that you can see the commands that have been run on your router, and not only which commands have been run, but who is running those commands. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys on Monday evening.